Hi, this is Ken and Michelle Bass.
And you're listening to the Resilient Parenting Podcast. Hey, we just came back from a little staycation. How are you feeling, Ken?
Tired?
Well, why are you tired? We just had a vacation.
That's what vacations do to you, or staycations do to you.
Yeah. You know what, though? I think you might be a little bit more tired because your staycation also meant that you went home a few times a day to take care of the dogs and cats. And they were really generous with you, weren't they?
Oh, they were very generous. They left me treats all over the place.
Yeah, but think
As long
about
as I
it.
had my little shovel, my little bag, I was fine.
That's because you always wanted to be a pirate and go on a treasure hunt.
That ain't gold I'm digging up out there.
Oh, well, speaking of gold, this topic I think is gold because this is something that actually impacts a lot of families, probably more than you realize, and is something that actually impacted our family as well. And so
It's a topic we haven't gotten into before, and we've covered a lot of topics.
we have, and it was important for us. It is important for us to make sure that we really highlight different families, different circumstances that come up. So if this is a topic that doesn't impact you, you never know who it will impact. And so getting some information or to be able to support your friends or family that might be
Affected by this?
Yes, affected by this, you could be a really good support, and you could also let them know about the podcast.
And let us know what you think about the podcast, too.
Yes, and we have a way to do that. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, no problem. I kind of lead in like that.
Yeah, you see how you are? Yeah, so on the show notes, there is a place where you can send us a text, and we would love to hear from you. Tell us what you're thinking about the podcast. And
Nicely.
Yes.
Please, be kind.
Yes. I mean, you can give us constructive feedback without being mean.
Yeah.
And we do want to hear from you. And also, we want to know what topics and areas you want to know more about, because this is not just Ken and I talking. We actually are wanting to be a support to everyone out there. So let's hear from you. And so, yeah, we're going to talk. What are we talking about today, Ken?
Well, you have to find out.
Oh, it's a surprise. Is this another treasure hunt?
No. But it'll come up just on the other side of this.
Well, welcome. Today we have Jen Blair, who, amongst many, many titles, she is a podcast host of In the Den with Mama Dragons, and we are so happy to have you join us today. Can you tell our listeners a little about you?
First of all, thanks for inviting me. I feel pretty honored to be in the midst of your podcast. I've been listening, and it's a great resource for parents. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that.
As far as myself, there's not a ton to tell. I grew up in a very conservative religious faith and was parenting my 4 kids, moving around the country, helping support my husband with his career. We were homeschooling.
Yeah?
We were living in rural Idaho at the time, and when my oldest son came out to us and told us he was gay, it pretty much blew my mind. I had no concept that this could happen when we were doing all of these super conservative, protect our kids from the world sort of thing. But anyone who knew this kid knew for sure that he was perfect and my ideas were what was wrong. And so I had to do some learning. That was about 12 years ago. Kind of launched me into the world of trying to help educate other parents.
Nice.
This dearth of information I found when he first came out, I had to hunt pretty hard
Yeah.
to figure out what on earth I was doing to try to parent this child. And so for about the last 12 years, I've been doing education and advocacy for other parents who have LGBTQ kids.
And that's exactly why we wanted you on our show. So we are feeling so honored to have you join us.
I thought Mama Dragons right off the bat had something to do with Dungeons and Dragons, but not. No.
There are people who request to join just because of their interest in dragons.
Are they disappointed?
A little bit.
Stranger Things ruined it for a lot of people, I guess.
Yep.
No. What you're doing, trying to help other parents learn, is very, very important, because when something like this happens to a parent, they're blindsided in many cases, and they're just kind of standing there with their mouth open going, what do I do? And some parents react negatively. Some parents, do want to do something positively. That's where you have to steer them in the right direction.
Right. And I think that is why what we wanted to talk about today was when your child comes to you for the first time, and lets you know that they're gay or transgender. I know for Ken and I, for full transparency, we have we have 4 beautiful children, and 2 of them are part of the LGBTQI population. And our youngest actually identifies as non-binary, they, them. And it wasn't, I knew a lot about all of this, and it was not easy going through the different emotions and things that went with that, in addition to trying to support our child. Sorry.
Yeah.
You were there too.
Still am.
So we wanted to really focus today on what parents can do when their child comes to them and lets them know that this is going on for them, and then what resources are available. And so where should we start, Jen?
Probably at the beginning when your kid comes out, right?
That's a very good place
the
to
first
start.
Part.
You knew I was going to say that.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie Andrews. Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Like anything, when our kids tell us shocking information, it's kind of hard to process. We're sometimes blindsided as parents. Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that we approach anything they tell us with the best answers we can.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When your child tells you that they're lesbian or they're transgender, they don't always have the language. It might be something like, I don't think I'm a girl. However they express that to us, our first response needs to be to thank them. Thank you for telling me. I'm really glad that you told me this. We want to know. These are things we want to know. We don't want to shut our children down. We want them to know that we just believe them. We're ready to listen. So the first thing we want to do is just thank them. Thank you so much for telling me. And then we want to make sure they know how much we love them. Whatever this little bump in the road is, we've done it all, right? The late nights, the croupy cough, the diapers, the first day of school, the first bullying. We've gone through all of it. This is just the next path. I love you. It's going to be okay. A nice little hug. We're going to get through it together sort of energy. And then our third step is going to always want to be, what can I do? How can I help? You've probably been learning about this for a while. Do you have resources that I could start with so that I can learn how to be the best parent I can be to you?
So true. That's so wild that you say that, because our child did do a lot of research.
Oh, they know.
They knew so much. They actually shared an app with me that, and I keep saying me because they came out to me first, just me and them, and it was a process. It wasn't linear. Like I call it waves of what information was shared with me, but along the way they were so like on top of all the correct, vocabulary and what it meant, and the app that basically said, these are what I'd like you to call me. These are, like even down to Tio or uncle versus Tia and aunt. It was really fascinating to have them be the expert and for me to be the student.
And that's sometimes hard for parents. I had a similar experience when my oldest, I also have 2 kids who are in the LGBTQ plus community. And when he came out, he was 16. And I said, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to parent you, but I'm going to figure it out. And he gave me a cute little hug with his patient, empathetic self and said, Mom, I've been trying to figure this out for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
I don't expect you to understand it in a day.
Oh.
And that was such a relief to me to be like, okay, because I did feel like all of a sudden I had this whole different parenting experience. Like we had conversations about safe sexual health and those
Right.
types of things. And all of a sudden, none of it seemed applicable. And I was running behind, and the hamster wheel was spinning, and I was doing it wrong, and I didn't know what to do. And just his little gentle, you know what, nobody's expecting you to understand this right now in this minute. It took me 4 years. It's okay if
Wow.
it takes you a little bit.
Now, coming from a conservative background like you had, it was probably even more difficult for you to accept or to deal with it. And this happens in many facets of life. And I will say, I was brought up in a very conservative family. And I was married before Michelle. And yeah, and I remember when the divorce happened, that I was floored because I felt I had failed in what I was supposed to do, because divorces weren't supposed to happen in our religion. And I can relate back to that now, thinking about how some parents probably feel this way in their conservative backgrounds and their religions.
That they did something wrong.
They did something wrong, and this shouldn't be happening. And sometimes they may turn away from it instead of embracing the child and what's going on.
What would you say to parents who might be feeling that way?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation, and I don't know if everyone listening is in that Gen X boomer demographic, but a lot of us were told a lot of lies. Things like maybe your daughter's a lesbian because she didn't have a healthy relationship with her father.
Oh,
Maybe the
I
mom
have
was
heard that.
overbearing. Maybe the mom sheltered and nurtured him too much and didn't have enough opportunity to be with his father and learn how to be a man. Those kind
Quit
of things.
blaming the mom.
Yeah.
Those ideas were very prevalent and still are in a lot of communities. Another issue, a lot of these kids have internalized a lot of ideas of internalized homophobia, internalized transphobia. They have been attending churches where they've been hearing messages that they're inherently evil, or that they're bound for hell, or that God couldn't possibly love them. And so they participate in self-harming behaviors. So sometimes by the time a parent learns that their child is LGBTQ, it seems like yet another issue. Perhaps the child's been experimenting with drugs. Maybe there's been issues with cutting or multiple suicide attempts. Maybe they're participating in risky sexual behaviors. And so when the child says, I'm actually transgender, for these parents without any background or any experience, what they're hearing is, great, another unhealthy choice that you're making.
Yeah.
If we dive into the research, we know it's not true. These aren't choices. The kids can't do anything about it. And all of the things that we were told in the 80s about tough love and helping people make choices are actually very, very damaging and harmful to these kids.
Yes, definitely.
Now, when somebody comes to like the Mama Dragons organization, what's the first step in helping out the parent with that?
We usually recommend that they read as much as possible first. We have a Facebook group with over 10,000 members, pretty close to 11,000 members now.
I'm one of them.
And it divides down into regional groups. Different areas have larger numbers of members. So you can ask local information about legislation that's possibly being passed or resources that are available for your child, or these 11,000 members. So people will come and ask questions. There are no bad questions. There are no ignorant questions. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And there's not a lot of spaces where you can ask these questions and people don't judge you.
Yeah, true.
Sometimes wounded communities fight back when they hear these ignorant questions. So the first step for most people is to join these groups and say, my child just came out. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. They're not going to have any friends. We're going to lose our community. We're going to be kicked out of our church. What did you do? And 50, 70, 100 moms will answer and say, this is what we did. Yeah. And it's going to be okay. We've walked this path. We've been there before you. We're happy to hold your hand and walk with you. So that's kind of the first step of this particular organization.
Yeah, I've loved it. I mean, in the beginning, they even sent a welcome letter, and it was just with some stickers, and I don't know, it just felt very welcoming. And I went to an in-person meeting where we could get to know other parents, other moms, and I remember participating in something that you put together that had to do with language and vocabulary, and because mine was FEM, I remember that.
Yeah.
And it was just another way for for those that are learning to be able to learn like what is the right word for what and what it means, because it's constantly changing, or like there's new things that you don't know that you don't know until you hear something and go, wait, what is that? And I discovered that with everything that we've done over the years with advocacy and then being parents of our children that are identified as LGBTQI plus. I discovered I didn't know a lot, and I thought I was pretty like on top of it, and I was not, and I am still learning. So I guess what I'm saying is give yourself some grace. And we also talked before we did the podcast episode that there are things that the parent is going through that is separate from the child. The grief and loss of what our dreams maybe were for the child. For me, I had that happen at the exact same time I was feeling joy about my child, one, feeling comfortable enough to share, and then to be a part of that journey with them, to support them, protect them. I really got mama bear, like protect, because it brings up so much. And I know this is just a little dosing of this information, and I really would love to be able to have other episodes to really pull back the layers even more for things that families are going through. But I also just realized we should plug the Den.
Well, you kind of did in the intro. So we have, I participate in a podcast called In the Den with Mama Dragons, where we break down episode by episode different parenting ideas. So possibly one episode might be on when your kid first comes out, or your teacher at school is bullying your kid. What are the resources that you have? What does the research say about how to parent?
Nice.
Those types of things intermixed with some general information about LGBTQ information just in general.
Right.
Like transitioning. Maybe your child isn't transgender, but if you understand what it means to transition.
And this is something that we could add to the show notes, maybe a link. That way then our listeners can go right to it. And that's a really great resource. And that is national, right? That's
international. We have a couple people out of the country that listen every week.
Perfect. Okay, so we have anyone anywhere can access that resource. And then also that's the same for the Mama Dragons. Is that international as well?
Yeah, we have a lot of people. There's a whole regional or subgroup of Spanish-speaking moms. So if you speak Spanish, you can join that group. I'm not in that space.
Okay, so on our show notes, we'll also include a link to...
if you go to the Mama Dragons website, that will kind of take you to all of the things that Mama Dragons has to offer. There's a program that I recommend to everybody who's new called Parachute. It's very inexpensive. It's an e-learning program.
Okay.
I wasn't in charge of it by any means. They did a phenomenal job, and it is the basics. Everybody I've talked to, including multiple therapists, people who work at the Department of Health and Welfare, have all said, I can't believe how much I learned watching that, even though it is the most basic beginner.
Wow.
You said the Mama Dragons website, which we can put a link on our show notes, but if you just Google Mama Dragons?
MamaDragons.org, M-A-M-A.
Pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Parachute?
The Parachute program you can access there. Mama Dragons also teaches suicide prevention courses.
Okay.
We know, tragically, that the suicide attempt rate and the suicide ideation rates are dramatically higher in the LGBTQ plus community, and that's increasingly higher in conservative areas where they're experiencing lots of negative conversations. And so having every parent, I would love it to be like CPR, where everybody kind of has an idea, like just overall basic suicide prevention awareness.
I think that everyone should have that, and also an understanding of LGBTQI, because you never know. You never know, just like you didn't have any idea until they came out, and they'd been investigating it and wondering for 4 years before they came out to you.
Right?
So,
how wonderful if I had known 10 years earlier all the information.
Yes.
instead of learning after the curve.
But as a
Yeah.
parent, I just want to add, don't beat yourself up when you're trying to figure all this out. Just do the best you can to learn. I mean, I still stumble with pronouns.
Well, and part of that, I'll just say, through the journey, I said it wasn't linear. It was more like a wave of information. It was as they were transitioning, they were figuring out what felt right, what fit them. And so some pronouns were changed until they found what fit them. And so we adjusted. And
so have other family members
Yeah.
when addressing them too.
Right, because it was part of, they actually included us probably early in they were 13. And so we adjusted, and it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to try this now. No, it was actually like with help of a counselor and, going to a doctor that specialized in that, and just trying to do what was comfortable for them as they were figuring out what fit for them, because what they were doing for the majority of their life was not fitting, and they are now their true self.
Sometimes there's a learning curve for these kids. It's a journey. For some, it's very black and white. They're 3 years old, and
Yeah.
they're like, I am not
Yeah.
a boy,
Yeah.
I am
Right.
a girl, and it's consistent their whole life. For other kids, they have to lean into the language a little bit. We sometimes compare it to trying on clothes. You try on an outfit, you think it's going to look pretty great, you wear it around for a while, and you realize it's not that comfortable. Maybe it's a little bit itchy, maybe it's shorter than you expected, and so you don't wear it anymore. You find another outfit, you try it on, you wear it around until you find what actually fits.
Right.
And
That's
the parent's job
exactly.
is to accept each
Yes.
announcement. This is my favorite outfit. Fantastic. I love you.
Yeah.
You look
Yes.
glorious.
Exactly. And
Instead
so
of, as Michelle says to me when I put on something, you going to wear that? You going to wear that out? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say I don't do that, but sometimes I do, so
Yeah,
never
I do.
mind.
One thing I'd like to caution parents about,
Oh, yes.
there's often some fear when your LGBTQ child
Yes.
comes out.
Yes.
Fear of the unknown, but also fear of the known. Some of those statistics out there are bleak. It's scary.
Yeah.
Your child doesn't need to carry your fears. You can find support groups for yourself. You can talk about these fears. You can process your grief, like was mentioned before, in your own networks. In
Right.
your own, if you need a therapist, fantastic. If you find a friend group, that's awesome. But don't put that on your child.
Right.
Your
They're
child-
dealing with enough as it is.
Right.
Your child might be the only queer person you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't become your teacher.
Wow.
Still.
I
And
love
that's
that.
really, really important to understand. There's buckets of resources out there to teach you how to do it. One of my favorite is the Family Acceptance Project. I send people there all the time. I have 100 little booklets I've purchased that I give out all the time. It's research from the San Francisco State University. Caitlin Ryan has headed that up, and it's won buckets of awards for being evidence-based research on what happens when parents appropriately affirm their children and what happens when they don't.
Oh, okay.
Suicide risks plummet, self-harming behaviors plummet if you have parents who are affirming. And the beautiful thing about this packet is it doesn't matter what's going on inside your head. This research is about what you do. It's very action-based. And reading over it might kind of seem obvious, but then when you think about it in context, I can see how it's not. So perhaps you have a daughter who's more masculine, and that's sort of socially acceptable. You don't worry about it too much. But if you have a son who's really feminine and you're terrified about him getting bullied at school, you're so scared, you might start to say things to him like, don't pop your hip out like that. Lower your voice. You're talking in a higher register. Lower your voice because you're trying so desperately to protect him.
Yes.
But the message, the research indicates, the message that child receives is your natural self is bothersome. Your natural self isn't appropriate in public, so you need to control yourself.
Right.
So some of the messages are really like, don't beat your child when they tell you. And you're like, well, of course not beating your child's always okay.
Right.
But historically, a lot of cultures, even within the U.S., have these ideas that if you want your son to be manly, you have to force him to do manly things. And maybe that's wrestling or boxing or having the siblings pick on them a little bit to toughen them up, to get them a thicker skin. Obviously, this is just a bad idea.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you're stuck in the panic and you don't know what to do, particularly if you believe it's a choice, if you think your child has chosen this and you're trying to motivate them to unchoose it, you're the one causing the harm at this point. You've become your child's most intense bully. We want to avoid that.
You want to love your child and show your child love and be sure that they know you're on their side.
Yeah. Sometimes when we're expressing love, I'm protecting you, it's received in a very different way. So the research here is beautiful because it's actually based on action. So even if your brain is in full panic mode and you don't know what's coming and you don't know what to do, if you can do the actions, and you don't even have to do all of them, just a few of them.
What's one action they could do right now?
Help your child find peers, LGBTQ plus peers. If they don't have them yet, help them find them. We know that it's an entire culture, and your family probably isn't in it.
Okay.
Even if you're going to Pride events, even if you're advocating and marching at the legislature, you're not in the culture. Your child needs role models, a future that they can see. Parents often express these things, right? Your child comes out and they say universally, over and over and over again, oh, but she would have been such a great mom. I'm so sad. I always wanted to be a grandma.
Oh.
If your child's in spaces where they can see queer people parenting, they can see queer people banking.
You can still end up being their grandma.
Yeah, like you might still these things, but when we have no exposure, when we have no representation, it limits everybody's perspective about what happens. So find a group. Find a support group, find a youth activity group.
A lot of schools have groups. I will say that ours went to school and they found their people.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I feel like everywhere that they go, if it's a group of youth, they find each other. Like I don't know, but it's really cool.
And we don't want to prohibit that. Like it goes back to that parenting out of fear. Sometimes parents will say, I totally accept her. It's totally fine. She's going to marry a woman. We're going to love her wife. It's going to be fantastic. But those queer kids are weird. And I don't want her to do all the weird stuff. And so they try to isolate their kids from the community in order to protect their kids, right? Like you can have a totally normal, beautiful life exactly as you are, hanging out with only cisgender, heterosexual people.
Is it exactly how they are, though, if they're not able to be around folks that...
Yeah, how would you define weird anyway?
I know, I was thinking all of them are just so fun and fantastic. And so's my kid, our kid. Sorry.
It's okay.
Oh my goodness.
I'm just here sitting in a corner. No problem.
But you can see from like a conservative parent point of view, you have all of these horrible images in your head about how homosexuality is the same thing as debauchery or promiscuity. And so you're like, I don't want my child to be with that community. I'll love them, but keep them away from that. And what you're really telling your kids is, I don't believe queer people are safe.
Right.
I believe something is wrong with queer people. And they internalize those messages.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much to think about, and lots of great resources. And hopefully we'll be able to get you back to talk more about specifics.
My favorite topic.
I couldn't tell. Well, you know a lot about it, too. And
Yeah.
we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot,
Well,
Jen.
thank you so much. This podcast is brought to you by the Idaho Children's Trust Fund.